The bell calls us together in covenant, to share, to reflect, to hear with open hearts. Today, let us especially remember our covenant to affirm and promote the fifth principle, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large.
On land formerly home to the Lenape Nation and the Blue Trail. This is CUUC Morning News with Tracy Brenneman.
Good morning, and welcome to Community Unitarian Universalist Congregation at White Plains. I'm Tracy Brenneman, Director of Religious Exploration. Meredith Garman is in the pulpit. Adam Kent is at the piano. It is good to be together. We'll begin with our solar and lunar updates. Meredith.
Thanks, Tracy. The 5 lights lit today indicate it is the 5th Sunday of spring. The length of daylight in White Plains is almost up to 14 hours. The moon was new on Wednesday night and is now waxing crescent. Tracy?
Thanks, Meredith. We'll now go to Adam for our observations report.
Eid al-Fitr was celebrated by Muslims around the world on Friday, April 21st. The celebration marks the end of Ramadan. Yesterday was Earth Day. First held in 1970, the annual event demonstrates support for environmental protection. Earth Day events around the world yesterday involved an estimated billion people in 193 countries. On the Christian calendar, today is St. George's Day, celebrating the patron saint of England, as well as of Portugal, Bulgaria, Romania, Catalonia, and naturally, Georgia.
And here in the UU tradition, we remember the 5 smooth stones of liberal religion. 1, revelation is continuous. Our understanding is ever evolving. 2, freedom. We strive to remove vestiges of coercion from all our relations. 3, justice. We strive to establish a just and loving community. 4, institution building. Good things don't just happen, people make them happen, and we have to do it together, even though that's often messy. And 5, meaningful change is possible.
Our theme for April is the spirituality of money. Copies of On the Journey, exploring this theme, are in the foyer. Journey groups are small groups that meet monthly to explore the monthly theme. Anyone is welcome to join a group. You can sign up at cuucwp.org. And now it's time for our You Can rundown.
You can bring verdant joy into our sanctuary. A donation of $25 will bring a flowering azalea, gardenia, calla lily, or peace lily to enliven our Sunday worship. Just make the check to CUUC and put spring flowers in the memo.
You can, and please do, hear wonderful music at our Spring Choral Concert. That's today at 12:30 p.m.
You can attend an open house celebration to honor Fardeen Ghafoor, brand new U.S. citizenship. That's also today in Fellowship Hall from 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock.
You can read this year's UUA Common Read book, Mistakes and Miracles, Congregations on the Road to Multiculturalism. And you can sign up for one of our discussion groups to talk about the book. Take your pick, Saturday, May 20th, Sunday, May 21st, Monday, May 22nd, or Thursday, May 25th. The Saturday is 10:30 a.m., the Sunday is 4 p.m. in the afternoon, and the Monday and Thursday are 7 p.m.
You can read and discuss the Science and Spirituality book, which is currently Yuval Harari's Homo Deus. Next meeting is Thursday, April 27th at 11:30 a.m.
You can hear Claire Kaczynski's Odyssey presentation. That's in 1 week after the service on April 30th.
You can play music at an upcoming worship service. That is, if you can play music, then you can play. On May 7th or May 21st, we're looking again for our musical members, Youth 2. Contact me.
You can attend Jazz Fest with the Valerie Capers Ensemble, Saturday, May 13th in our sanctuary at 8 p.m.
You can experience General Assembly. It's June 21st to 25th in Pittsburgh or on Zoom. For details about all these stories and more, see your e-communitarian. And now we give a special welcome to our visitors. If you are new today and comfortable being recognized, please raise a hand so we can welcome you, including our guest and his spouse. Those online, if you would like to introduce yourself, you can do so in the chat, and you'll find the order of service on our website at cuucwp.org. For April, our Share the Plate funds go to Murray Grove UU Retreat and Renewal Center in New Jersey. You may make out a check with the memo, Share the Plate, Murray Grove, and add it to the collection plate or mail it to the office. You can also use the donate button on our website to contribute online to the plate share, as well as for your pledge and the minister's discretionary fund.
If you have a joy, sorrow, or milestone you'd like to share, you may write it in our Joys and Sorrows book, which is on my right in the back. If you're online, you can enter it into the chat. Please make the first word joy, sorrow, or milestone. And if you're interested in becoming a member of CUUC, speak with me or contact the office to make an appointment.
And now a special report from our senior tag sale correspondent, Terry Kung.
Good morning, everyone. As you can see, I'm dressed, ready to scrounge around in my basement looking for things to sell at my table next week. So our tag sale is next Saturday, April 23rd. We still have a few tables left to sell. April 29th. I'm got a wave at the back. April 29th, next Saturday. We still have 8 tables, so if you want to rent a table, please see Scott Demachek. Please do not bring your own items for us to sell. What we're doing is you are renting a table and you are selling your own items. It's going to be a fun day. We've really promoted the event to everyone in the community, the wider community. We are going to have breakfast and lunch available. So even if you're not selling or buying anything, come and join us, have a quick bite to eat, say hello to your friends. We are taking donations of small appliances and small pieces of furniture for Furniture Share House. You can bring those in at any time this week or during the tag sale. Small being anything that will fit into a regular sized vehicle. So don't bring your couches or your refrigerators. No. So rice cookers, a microwave that you have extra downstairs. Those are very much appreciated. Also, there has been a request specifically for sets of flatware they are in need of. So if you have some old flatware around your house, this is the week to bring it in. And then finally, we have a lot of copies of the flyers in the back. So please take one with you so you know the time and the location. It is running rain or shine. If there's anyone in the congregation who lives in the Highlands area in White Plains, please see Scott Demachek. They are having a big tag sale, and we'd like somebody to post some of our flyers for us around there. Also, please take a couple of extra flyers if you have places to post them, because we do want people from the community to come and join us. Thank you, and we'll see you next Saturday for a little bit of fun.
Good morning. I'm Kim. I'm your hymn leader this morning. And if you haven't yet, I'll invite you to take a moment to silence your cell phones. I invite you to rise in body or spirit for our opening hymn, number 1000, Morning Has Come. And it's in the teal hymnal. Morning has come, arise and greet the day. Dance with joy and sing a song of gladness. The light of hope He shines upon each face. May it bring faith to guide our journey home. Open great dawns, once more the gift is given. Wonder fills this moment shared together. The light of peace journey home. Open our eyes to see that life abounds. Open hearts to welcome it among us. The light of love He shines upon each face. May it bring faith to guide our journey home. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Finn. On the fifth Sunday of the season, we dedicate our chalice to the fifth principle of our faith, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process. We invite those online to light a chalice or a candle at home. Please join me in the chalice lighting words from the Passover Haggadah in your order of service. May the light we now kindle inspire us to use our powers, to heal and not to harm, to help and not to hinder, to bless and not to curse, to serve you, Spirit of freedom.
Humanism. The word was used for a Renaissance revival of interest in ancient Greek and Roman works. The humanist movement in the early 20th century also emphasized authorities other than scripture or priests. The latter movement, however, put its faith not in antiquity, but in science and progress and human reason to work out all problems, technological and social.
At the 1908 American Philosophical Association meeting at Cornell University, one of the talks was by Reverend Frank Doane, a Unitarian minister on the faculty of Meadville Theological School. Reverend Doane introduced his philosophy, which he called cosmic humanism. It was essentially a liberal Christianity, but Doane insisted upon starting with the human in his search for the divine. That 1908 talk was the first time, as far as anybody's been able to tell, that a Unitarian minister used the term humanism.
John Hassler Dietrich, 30 years old in 1908, was a minister in the Reformed Church and not present for Doane's talk, but Dietrich on his own was beginning to inch in the same direction. By 1911, the Reformed Church accused Dietrich of heresies, including denying the infallibility of the Bible, denying the virgin birth of Jesus, denying the deity of Jesus, and denying the efficacy of the atonement.
Compelled to resign his ministry, Dietrich became Unitarian and accepted a call to serve the First Unitarian Society of Spokane, Washington. From the Spokane pulpit, Dietrich continued to evolve and develop his theology, leaving traditional theism farther and farther behind. In his 5th year at Spokane, he announced he was adopting the term humanism as a good name for his interpretation of religion in contrast to theism. Meanwhile, at the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky, an earnest young man named Curtis Wilford Reese was preparing for Baptist ministry.
We gather today in reflection of the ideals expressed in what we call the eighth principle. Unitarian Universalist principles are a covenant. We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person or every being, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, acceptance of one another, and encouragement to spiritual growth, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, the right of conscience and the use of democratic process, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, respect for the interdependent web of existence of which we are a part, and The eighth principle, journeying toward spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and in our institutions. This, then, be the vision and aspiration which our invocation summons today. The vision of diverse, multicultural, beloved community. The aspiration that our lives be committed to dismantling racism, dismantling all oppressions, while holding ourselves accountable to each other and the least advantaged. May it be so.
Please join in our sung invocation. This is my song, O God of all the nations, a song of peace for lands afar and mine. For other lands have sunlight too, and clover, and skies are everywhere as blue as mine. Oh, hear my song, thou God of all the nations, a song of peace for their land and for mine.
This arrangement of the popular spiritual Deep River is by a late 19th, 20th century composer, Rich Taylor. It's from a collection of 24 settings of melodies by from African sources or Caribbean or
Our Canvas Minute today is from Kathleen Kiernan.
Good morning. Today I'm going to talk to you about how awesome CUUC is for families and about my family's experiences so far. So a few years ago during COVID, my kids asked me what happens when we die. I did my best to answer, explaining we don't really know, people have various beliefs. I don't remember exactly what I said, but for some time after that, my kids were super freaked out about death. So I felt like I needed some spiritual backup, and I went looking for a congregation and tested the waters at CUUC. And as things went back in person and our family got more involved, we kept finding more wonderful things. We were a little spotty in our attendance to our religious exploration, or RE, to begin with, but we never felt pressured to come or guilty about missing something. And one of our first adventures with RE was a placekeeping Sunday. It turns out that day it meant walking through the woods, connecting with nature, and helping maintain the grounds as a wildlife habitat. I'm not sure we could have designed a better activity to lure in our children. It's really special to find a congregation that incorporates these type of activities into the regular program. Like so many things at CUUC, you can feel the thoughtfulness and consideration that permeates the program. The entire curriculum is both age appropriate and engaging. Right now, my daughter is loving the Our Whole Lives, or OWL, experience for 1st through 3rd grade. She's always had a lot of questions about birth, babies, bodies, and families, and I'm reassured that she has another resource besides our own family conversations about these topics that I can trust to be healthy, supportive, and comprehensive. My son also participated in the Friday OWL sessions, which he feels prepared him well for life, and he's enjoying the spiritual tools he's exploring on Sundays with the Toolbox of Faith curriculum. He's always been interested in physical tools, so the metaphor really helps him connect to the underlying spiritual concepts. Also, both the kids are making friends and having fun experiences in this inclusive environment, connecting with people who believe in treating everyone with respect and dignity, which unfortunately does not always happen outside of the CUUC bubble. And it's important to have those safe spaces, especially for children, to see that those ideals can actualize. And my husband and I also have a lot of reasons we enjoy being part of CUUC. We're not just coming for the kids. It's my second year of being in a journey group, and I've had some really powerful experience with that. And we're impressed with the breadth and depth of the social justice teams. Like, they have so many causes close to our heart, and like, they're so active. So for us, our financial commitment followed our experience from, let's try this out. It seems like a good starting place, to, wow, this is awesome. We need to make sure this congregation has the ability to thrive. So hopefully you heard something today, had your own experiences that move you guys to, wow, this is awesome. I hope I can contribute so that this congregation has the ability to thrive.
Please join me in prayer. Dear Spirit of life and love, be with us. You always are. May we notice your presence everywhere, in all things, and may our hearts be opened. We grieve today the intense fighting in and around Khartoum, Sudan. As of Friday, 413 people had been killed and 3,500 injured in Sudan since intense fighting broke out there 6 days before. May there be peace. Let our hearts be with the hundreds of families in Colombia under threat of volcanic eruption as they face the agonizing choice between the risks of staying and the loss of abandoning homes and livelihoods. Let our hearts be with the habitats and the beings, including humans, recovering from Cyclone Ilsa, which blasted Western Australia with record-breaking sustained winds of 260 kilometers an hour. Our hearts grieve the actions of the Florida State Board of Education, which voted Wednesday to expand a ban on teaching students about sexual orientation and gender identity to cover Florida middle school and high school teachers. The ban had previously applied to just kindergarten through third grade. The law has prompted schools to roll back policies intended to be sensitive to gay and transgender students, including bathroom access, pronoun use, protections for children who confide information about their sexual orientation or gender identity. We observed Earth Day yesterday, as a recent report indicated that the Greenland and Antarctic ice sheets, home to nearly all of the Earth's freshwater ice, are melting at a pace that has increased sixfold over the last 30 years. 40% of the global population lives in coastal areas, so sea level rises threaten massive global destabilization. This is fearful news, yet let our hearts be brave to face the tasks before us. Even in our moments of sorrow, may we know also the current of joy that flows through our existence. Let our hearts be grateful for conservation efforts around the world, as we note the news this week that the tiger population in India more than doubled in the last 15 years and is now over 3,000. Let our hearts be grateful for the small steps, even as we are hopeful for larger ones. Foreign ministers from the world's 7 wealthiest nations made a pact on last week to hasten the timeline for a shift to renewable energies and greener emissions. A number of companies aiming to be eco-friendly pursue developments in more sustainable vacationing, including more sustainable ships, greener ski resorts, and promotion of cycling to get around in vacation destinations. May small steps lead to larger ones. Washington's state legislature on Thursday passed a ban on dozens of semi-automatic rifles. The Supreme Court is temporarily preserving access to mifepristone. May small steps lead to larger ones. May our hopes and our gratitude guide our action. May we be a people who delight in what is good, confront what is cruel, and heal what is broken. For what has been spoken, and for all that we are holding today in our hearts, we observe a moment of silence. Blessed be. Amen.
Our song response. Calling out to hungry hearts everywhere through endless time. You who wander, you who thirst, I offer you contented mind. Calling out to hungry spirits everywhere through endless time. Calling out to hungry hearts, all the lost and the left behind. Gather round and share our lives, your joy and your sorrow, I make it mine.
We have this chance now to extend to one another our blessings of and wishes for peace. Please turn and pass the peace to those around you.
Our fifth principle, our covenant to affirm and promote the right of conscience and the use of democratic process, expresses our commitment both to individual conscience and democracy. The morning offertory also expresses both of those commitments. The beloved community is truly the work of the people. There is no other support for this congregation but yours. Upon your conscience we depend, as well as the vote of your feet to be here, the vote of your hands and of your wallet to sustain and grow this community of memory and hope. For together we bring our generosity to effect healing.
Few composers better embodied multiculturalism than Claude Debussy. Whether he was evoking far-off Asia, East India, the United States, or in this case, Spain. In his music, he frequently journeyed to lands and evoked peoples he actually had visited and experienced only in his imagination. So the case with this piece, La Puerta del Vino, that was apparently inspired by a postcard that was sent in by a colleague of one of the great gateways into the Alhambra Palace complex in Granada, Spain.
Hello, everyone. If you don't know me, I'm Tycho. Anyone else dying of spring allergies? Out there, I know you're out there. All right. So I live in Hawthorne and I go to Westlake High School and I'm in 9th grade. And I can't believe it's been a year since I've been in my coming of age class and we made the chalice, our creation that we're dedicating today. It's weird but great to see it right there in the triangle, right there for everyone to see. So our chalice was constructed and symbolic of all of the years of coming of RE that we've been in. And in our class, besides Una Finstoff and I, Neil Mitra, Tyler Prozis, Claire and Kira Sedova, and Franny Kastner also partook in the designing of this chalice. For the design of the chalice, we had the base of the chalice with intricate design due to the handiwork of Din Sameda. Then we added 8 flames of varying colors to represent the 8 UU principles. It was important to us to incorporate the 8th principle because of how key it is to our UU faith. I also have to thank Tim Lynch and Joe Majak for their help in the construction of the chalice. I'll now hand it off to Una.
Hi, I'm Una Goodspeed. First, I want to start by saying we're so grateful to Din Sameda, Tim Lynch, and Joe Majak for the support in designing and placing the chalice in such a beautiful space. And we especially thank Dinsa for the fantastic opportunity to go to his studio, learn his techniques, and create the chalice under his supervision. The whole process started off with Dinsa coming to our Sunday class and explaining what he did and how the process would work. We all started discussing and decided on a kind of chalice tree with all the branches as the 8 principles, which I remember Dinsa was very excited to work with us on. When I went to Dinsa's studio with Tycho, I remember how he listened to our ideas and inspirations, taught us how to use his machines, and let us work. I appreciated that Dinsa had some input on basic construction, but let us do whatever we felt creatively, listening to our ideas about the chalice and branches reaching out. The process was challenging, especially in the heat, but it was fulfilling actually doing all the hard work. First, we took the metal planks and placed them in the slots, deciding which length would look best where. Then we got to work marking where we should put bends in the metal, and we were off to the garage to bend them with Dinsa's machine one by one. Next, we had to paint them the colorful colors you see now and place them into their assigned slot. During the whole experience, I really felt the connection to growing up Unitarian Universalist, where adults let you make your own decisions and are there to guide, not tell. I think this whole experience was really empowering as well as fulfilling, from getting to build and construct this art piece for my own congregation, as well as just simply being welcomed to Dinsa's beautiful property with all of his art pieces on the lawn and getting to experience his generosity when he took Tycho and me out to lunch. I'm so grateful for the experience and getting to contribute to my congregation.
Hi, my name's Bruce Pollack-Johnson, and since I like to sing as well as talk, we're going to start with hymn number 407. I don't know if we have a slide for it or not, but it's in the gray hymnal if not, and you probably know it anyway, and it's very repetitive, so do you usually stand when you do hymns? Let's stand. This is a good one, too. We're gonna sit at the welcome table. Please join. We're gonna sit at the welcome table one of these days. Hallelujah. We're gonna sit at the welcome table. Gonna sit at the welcome table one of these days. All kinds of people around that table. All kinds of people around that table one of these days. Hallelujah. All kinds of people around that table. Gonna sit at the welcome table one of these days. No fancy style, no fancy style at the welcome table. No fancy style at the welcome table one of these days, hallelujah. No fancy style at the welcome table. Gonna sit at the welcome table one of these days. Gonna sit at the welcome table one of these days. Nice thing. Good morning. Nice to be here, Community UU Congregation at White Plains. I'd like to thank Joe for inviting me to speak to you today. Joe and I have worked together on the 8th Principle strategy for many years now, and it was great to get to know Ann, Andrew, and Lane at dinner last night. Thank you all for being here. As I said, my name is Bruce Pollack-Johnson. My pronouns are he and him. My home in Philadelphia sits on the unceded lands of the Lenni Lenape Nation. I am a cisgender, straight, mentally and mostly physically able-bodied, tall, thin, older, educated, middle-class European American man who has been racialized as white by our society. Virtually all of these identities give me more privilege and access to power than those with marginalized identities that do not yet have the same access to that power and privilege. I've tried to leverage my power and privilege to dismantle and redesign the systemic structures that have created these inequalities of resources, opportunities, and power. For example, my partner Linda and I decided to hyphenate our last names when we got married, symbolizing the connection of two equal individuals, and we gave our kids the last name of Paulson, Paul from her family name, and son from my family name, Johnson, using the genetic metaphor of each parent contributing a piece of who their children are, to encourage systems that are non-sexist and sustainable. I'd like to start my remarks today with a simple metaphor. Suppose you were invited to a dinner, and as everyone sat down to their assigned seats, you saw the nice dinners set out for each person with shrimp and chocolate-dipped strawberries. Suddenly, someone walks in and starts taking individual shrimp and strawberries from the people of color at the table and gives them to the European Americans. Surely you would immediately speak up and stop this blatant unfairness and racism. Now imagine the second scenario. Situation is the same, but this time the redistribution has occurred before everyone arrived. Would you notice? Would you say or do anything? Systemic racism, like other oppressions, carries power largely because it is invisible to those who benefit from it, like in my second scenario. Part of my goal today is to metaphorically show you the video of the redistribution that occurred before we arrived. Unitarianism and Universalism, as we know them, were largely formed in the late 1700s, right around the same time as the United States of America. And so the racism of our Constitution and society was baked into each of them. Unitarianism had origins in Transylvania, Poland, and England, and focused on components like believing Jesus was a human being, the importance of freedom of conscience and reason, and rejection of the ideas of original sin and infallibility of the Bible. Universalists, on the other hand, did not believe that people could end up in hell, and believed in an immortal soul, universal love, and working toward building the kingdom of heaven on earth. I like the following simplified comparison. The Unitarians believed that man, yes, typically expressed in that sexist manner, that man was too good to go to hell, and Universalists believed that God was too good to send men to hell. Yes, also usually expressed in a sexist form. I think of the Unitarians as elite, well-educated thinkers and individualists, and the Universalists as more working-class spiritual folks with good hearts and more of a community orientation. Part of the brilliance of Unitarian Universalism, the merger of these two faiths, is recognizing the importance of balance of both the head and the heart in this life. When Europeans first came to this continent, slavery existed in many forms. In this country, usually as an indentured servitude, which generally meant servitude for a certain period of time or until a debt was paid off. But it originally had no connection to the color of a person's skin. In the 1600s, there were a number of uprisings, especially Bacon's Rebellion, where indentured servants of European and African descent worked together against bad working conditions imposed by the elites they served. The elites saw how this endangered their own power, and so they devised a brilliant scheme to divide and conquer these two groups. They invented the concept of whiteness, related to the color of one's skin, and gave the poor folks, defined to be white, power to control those defined not to be white, as overseers or enforcers. They pushed the idea that those with darker skin were not equal human beings to whites, or not human beings at all, and therefore cruelty was justified and encouraged. Even though their conditions may have been even worse for these poor whites compared to before, they received the psychological benefit of feeling superior, and that was enough to keep them from cooperating with those they actually had more in common with. Before long, servitude was defined by one's race, this social construction based on skin color, in the form of chattel slavery. Those who were enslaved were the property of their enslavers forever, and so were their children. Laws were passed that any white person could injure, rape, or kill any so-called Negro and could not be prosecuted or punished in any way for it. Because enslavement was inherited, the slave trade could be ended without ending the institution of slavery, since an enslaver could force himself on an enslaved woman, and the resulting children would also be enslaved and his property. This system of enslavement and forced labor built the wealth of these elites, as well as farmers and businesses in the North and elsewhere, and built the wealth of our country to eventually surpass that of all others. Thomas Jefferson, who many of us claim as a UU, had great ideas about equality, mostly limited to wealthy white men with land, of course, but he did not consider Africans to be equal humans to Europeans, although he wasn't sure whether Native American Indians were or not. And despite saying that he would like to free his own slaves, he never did free them. And many people would say that his siring of children with Sally Hemings could not be anything but sexual assault. Some Unitarians and Universalists supported the abolition of slavery, although not necessarily believing in racial equality. But others were on the wrong side of history. After emancipation, chattel slavery was ended, and some progress was made during Reconstruction, but this was soon replaced by the Black Codes and the Jim Crow system, whose effect was very similar to enslavement and strengthened the idea and culture of white supremacy. Even the New Deal, Social Security, and the GI Bill, while helping millions of Americans, did not provide the same benefits to people of color that it did to white families. Systemic racism was built into all of them. Unitarians and Universalists did not welcome African Americans as ministers or even members in many places well into the 20th century. And both denominations were active in and supportive of the eugenics movement, which contributed to Hitler's Nazi atrocities and tried to justify systemic racism. However, during the civil rights movement, things began to change, and many UUs were moved to build relationships with civil rights organizations, and then heeded the call to come to Selma after Bloody Sunday. UUs James Reeb and Viola Liuzzo were among the martyrs of the civil rights movement. Around this time, many African Americans joined UU congregations when they saw UUs walking the talk. Later in the 1960s, however, many Black Americans shifted their focus away from the explicit nonviolence of Martin Luther King Jr., especially after his assassination, and toward the Black Power movement, heavily influenced by Malcolm X, Stokely Carmichael, or Kwame Ture, and the Black Panthers. Some UUs were supportive of this shift, and a group called the Black Affairs Council, or BAC, was created to fund Black-initiated projects in Black neighborhoods organized by the Black UU Caucus, or BUC, and supported by a group of white allies called Fullback. The story is complicated. The quick summary is that the National UU Annual Meeting, called the General Assembly, or GA, voted in 1968 to fund BAC at $250,000 per year for 4 years, so $1 million commitment, seen as a form of reparations. But after 1 year of funding, a financial crisis was discovered in the UUA, and no more funding was given after that first year. I call this the Black empowerment betrayal, and after it, many hundreds of Black UUs left the denomination. This crisis was so contentious that there was little racial justice work for a couple of decades in the UUA after that. Meanwhile, the Jim Crow system that was toppled by the civil rights movement, after some years of good progress, morphed into the war on drugs, the system of mass incarceration, and the school-to-prison pipeline, what Michelle Alexander has called the new Jim Crow. After the video of the beating of Rodney King, however, in the 1990s, a new movement for racial justice started to build, ending in a number of GA resolutions to become an anti-racist, anti-oppression, multicultural organization. The Journey Toward Wholeness program was created, which included developing the Jubilee anti-racism workshops, which I know you all did here recently, with Crossroads, providing a good common analysis and understanding of systemic racism for thousands of UUs. GAs and other meetings included process observations and right relations teams to hold ourselves accountable and deal with racist comments and actions. We had our first African American president of the UUA, and a lot of progress ensued. Sadly, a few years into the new millennium, the commitment to anti-racism waned. Funding for Jubilee workshops ended, and there was a shift in the direction of a much watered-down multicultural competence approach. In 2013, Pollack-Johnson, who I think many of you know, an African-American racial justice consultant and staff person for the UUA at the time, shared an observation with me. She said she had noticed that in her work with UU congregations, there were two categories of congregations, what she called the 7 principles congregations and the beloved community congregations. The problem in her mind was that many UUs felt that they were living by the 7 principles, but were totally oblivious to systemic racism. Even though you could say the first or many of them imply it, it was not in people's consciousness. She said, maybe what we need is another principle. So I'm the kind of person that responds immediately to a challenge like that. Linda and I were just working on the puzzle for NPR this morning. So I stayed up late that night and wrote out an early draft of the 8th principle. I shared it with Paula, we revised it together, then worked out final revisions with a post-Jubilee support group that we were co-leading at the time. The result was the 8th principle, as we know it today, which reads, as Meredith said before, journeying towards spiritual wholeness by building a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. I immediately proposed that my congregation adopt it as a principle. But at that point, we decided to add the language to our existing congregational covenant in 2014 and not go all the way of making it a principle. Later that year in August, in response to the uprising in Ferguson, our congregation started a weekly Black Lives Matter vigil and hung up a Black Lives Matter banner. Participants in the vigil spend half an hour with signs on the street then light candles and share readings, songs, and racial justice concerns and history. And we've been doing it every week since 2014. As many of you know, in 2017, the president of the UUA voluntarily resigned in response to charges of systemic racial bias and insensitivity, even though he himself was Latino, related to hiring practices in the UUA. This crisis led to the formation of the Commission on Institutional Change, or CIC, by our 3 African-American interim co-presidents and a co-moderator team that included trans folks and people of color. Congregations around the country held white supremacy teach-ins. My congregation responded by adding the 8th principle immediately, overwhelmingly. We were the first to adopt it, and we formed an 8th principle team to implement it. Black Lives of UUism, or BLUE, immediately endorsed it, and Honolulu and All Souls, DC adopted it soon after that. That summer at General Assembly, Paula and I introduced the 8th principle as a responsive resolution, and it passed overwhelmingly. That doesn't mean it was added as a principle, but people were supportive. This should have led to the formation of an Article 2 commission to consider the 8th principle and other possible changes to the principle's purposes and sources immediately. But I think the UUA board decided to let the Council on Institutional Change finish its work before moving on to the Article 2 Commission. The CIC released its report in 2020 called Widening the Circle of Concern after deeply studying systemic racism and white supremacy culture in the UUA and making recommendations about how to dismantle it, both in congregations and at the national UUA level. That summer, the Article 2 Commission was formed, and they have been hard at work, bringing a proposal to the UUA board this past January, with a slightly modified version to be proposed at GA in just a couple of months in Pittsburgh. I know a number of you have been talking about this among yourselves. In the meantime, the number of congregations adopting the 8th principle was about 30 2 years ago, and now has jumped to over 230. About a quarter of the 1,000 congregations in our association, including a few UU groups like the UU Ministry for Earth. Why is the 8th principle so important to so many UUs? In the middle of the 20th century, UUism tended to focus on individual freedom and reason. The 7th principle, adopted in 1985 about the interdependent web of life of which we are part, brought more focus on the importance of relationships, gender, and the environment, reflecting a higher level of consciousness in those areas. In a similar way, the 8th principle recognizes the development of a higher level of consciousness related to systemic racism and other oppressions since the 1990s. The resolutions that were passed in the 90s were not enough to sustain our commitment. Adding it to our foundational commitments is the way to make it ever present in the minds of all UUs, to show our true commitment, to walk the talk, and to hold ourselves and each other accountable to that commitment. Once a month, Paula and I hold gatherings on Zoom of what we call the 8th Principle Learning Community. For over a year, there have been a couple years now, there have been a couple hundred UUs on each call, learning from each other, sharing experiences and lessons learned. We've seen how the commitment to dismantling systemic racism as represented by the 8th principle has been so meaningful to people of color in a congregation and to young folks who otherwise would be inclined to not bother getting involved in a spiritual community. It's a way of helping us free our movement from its narrow, Eurocentric, and Christian roots to something much more powerful and universal that is appealing to so many people. The Article 2 Commission was instructed to incorporate the 8th principle into our foundational commitments, and they've done that quite well as totally recognizing how those commitments are structured, totally reorganizing how they're structured. To me, the bottom line is that the most meaningful work comes from each congregation looking at itself and thinking deeply about how white supremacy culture has inevitably penetrated the way we do things, and making a commitment to doing the work needed to dismantle that embedded systemic racism. I'm very proud that the eighth principle has helped hundreds of congregations like CUUC have had these deep and transformative conversations, and I hope that eventually all UU congregations will do so, whether spurred by a newly passed Article 2 or our good old eighth principle. Theologically, there's been a shift of emphasis in UUism from individual freedom to collective liberation. Many of us talk about beloved community as our vision for where we want to go. We talk about the importance of love, but that word is not yet contained in our foundational commitments, in any of the principles. Spiritually, racism and other oppressions damage the souls of all of us, both the oppressed and the oppressor. For those of us who are white, knowing that we have benefited from something we do not deserve is painful and damages our soul. If we want to become whole spiritually, we need to do this work to repair that injustice. That is the work of radical inclusion or radical hospitality, which goes beyond inviting people to join a club and recognizes that as new people join our community is changed and improved. You here at CUUC have shown that spirit of inclusion by the way your youth were involved in the design of the beautiful new eighth principle sculpture. The eighth principle focuses on racism because that has been the source of our two major crises as a denomination, or technically an association of congregations. Theologian James Cone has called racism America's original sin. Well, we UUs don't believe in original sin, but we can understand his point. At the same time, similar dynamics can affect LGBTQIA+ folks, people with disabilities, women, and many other groups. We want to work toward beloved community where every person feels at home, accepted, and loved for who they are at their core. Our music, habits, and cultural awareness can have a huge effect. The eighth principle has been a beacon helping us see the path toward this goal. The Widening the Circle report is an initial roadmap of ways to get there. Now that I've shown you the video of the redistribution that occurred before we got to the dinner table, I trust that you will be moved to do something about that injustice. Don't get stuck in guilt. Guilt is simply awareness without action. The remedy is simple. Take action. My congregation, UUs of Mount Airy and Philly, is currently working with NCOBRA PHL, the Philadelphia branch of the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America, to pass a bill in our city council to create a reparations task force. I'm sure CUUC will find its own unique way to contribute to anti-racism in this area. We all have been tainted by decades of socialization in a racist society. It's time to do something about it. I hope all of you at CUUC will continue to think deeply about and discuss the implications of having adopted the eighth principle. I wish you well in your journey, and I'm happy to be helpful in any way I can. May it be so. And now we will transition. I'll change hats to special music. This is a song called There Is a Wall by Charlie King. There is a chorus that repeats, and if you're the kind of person who likes to jump in on choruses, I'd love it if you would do that. There is a wall, and it's the tallest wall of all. They named a street for it, where numbers rule and eyes go blank, a wall of gold. They buy the future with the past, they call it work. Seems more like money in the bank. And way down at the foot of that wall, where the guards can barely see her at all, wall. A woman is standing, not asking, not demanding. A poor woman is standing with a hammer in her hand. Don't you want a piece of that wall when it comes down? Don't you want to live to see it fall when it comes round? When that wall is gone, no matter which side we were on. Can you say you took a piece of that wall down? Don't you want a piece of that wall? There is a wall, and it's the meanest wall of all, stretched from my doorstep straight back to 1492. It hides the settlements, it hides the ovens, the reservations, pink triangles, passbooks, shackles, and tattoos. But way down in the foot of that wall, where the guards can barely see him at all, an old man is standing, not asking, not demanding. An old black man is standing with a hammer in his hand. Don't you want a piece of that wall when it comes down? Don't you want to live to see it fall when it comes round? When that wall is gone, no matter which side you were on. Could you say you took a piece of that wall down? Don't you want a piece of that wall? There is a wall, and it's the oldest wall of all, a wall of fear. Holds danger out, desire in, a wall that bristles each time the warden brings back tales. Inside we're starving. We make the bricks to build the cells, to bury love, to bar the door, to ban the stranger. And way down at the foot of that wall, where the guards can barely see at all, a stranger is standing, not asking, not demanding. A stranger is standing with a hammer for your hand. Don't you want a piece of that wall when it comes down? Don't you want to live to see it fall when it comes round? When that wall is gone, no matter which side you were on. Will you say you took a piece of that wall down? Don't you want a piece of that wall? Yes, we want a piece of that wall when it comes down. Yes, we want to live to see it fall when it comes round. When that wall is gone, no matter which side we were on. We will say we took a piece of that wall down. Yes, we want a piece of that wall. Thank you.
From the Tibetan teachings called Lojong, our 30th training in compassion is loosen the grip of negative impulses. Along the path of practice, obstacles, blockages, neuroses keep popping up. There are 3 challenges. First, notice the beginning of the negative impulse. Anger, fear, aggression, ignorance, jealousy, pride. Be on the lookout for whatever your habitual negative impulses are, so you're aware of the instant any of them pop up. Usually, by the time we recognize we've been captured by a confused emotion, it's too late. We're already overwhelmed. If we try, though, we can get a little quicker on the draw and recognize them sooner in their arising. Second, let go of the impulse. Once it appears, it's compelling and very difficult to release. Here's a technique that can help with that. As soon as you notice the negative impulse forming, stop. Literally, whatever you're doing, stop. If you're walking, stop walking. If you're sitting, stand up. If you're thinking, stop thinking.
I'm trying to think, but nothing happens.
Take a deep breath and then let yourself release the impulse. You may notice that the root of these negative impulses is our fixation on ourself. Third, rinse and repeat. The force of the residual habit energy will bring the habitual impulse up again. Notice its arising as early in the process as you can and let it go again. The practice isn't about being perfect or getting it right. It's about noticing each obstacle and coming back to your intention over and over. If you can do that, that's all the getting it right that there is. For the rest of the instruction on loosening the grip of negative impulse, see the post at cucmatters.org. The link is in your e-communitarian.
Thank you so much for being with us this morning. Please join me in gratitude for our worship team, music director, greeters, ushers, and tech team. Those with us online may log out of this Zoom and log into the coffee hour Zoom room. The link is on our website and we will post it in the chat. Those with us here may stay for an enhanced coffee hour in Fellowship Hall with special treats courtesy of the CUUC choir. We then invite everyone in person and online to return to the sanctuary at 12:30 for our spring choral concert featuring the choir plus guest singer Adam Chabanian and Adam Kent. Aram Chabanian, my apologies. We will post the Zoom link in the chat. And remember to please put your name tags in the basket.
As we extinguish the chalice here, we invite those at home to extinguish their chalices as well. Now please join me in saying our chalice extinguishing words. Our chalice extinguish the flame of conscience and the light of the democratic method are now ours to carry forth.
And may you leave this place knowing that you are good, cherishing diverse, beloved community, and aspiring to live that love and that community in all that you are and do. Go in peace.
Please rise. Rise as you are able. Come unto me. Sing.